that potentially chemical weapons have been used inside of Syria. It doesn't tell us when they were used, how they were used. Obtaining confirmation and strong evidence, all of those things we have to make sure that we work on with the international community, and we ourselves are going to be putting a lot of resources into focusing on this.
We want them to really send investigators there, and I think the evidence will show that the Syrian regime have used these chemical weapons, and I think that's the very first stage that we're focused on, is having that certainty, 100% certainty that the Assad regime did use these chemical weapons, and then after that we'll talk about the consequences.
Charles, let's start with what the president said and, frankly, what he didn't say.
Well, in the clip you showed earlier in the show where he was with King Abdullah, he used the word systematic use of chemical weapons. So all of a sudden he's adding these adjectives which would make it a higher standard. It is clear from what you just showed that he has no desire to discover that these weapons were used, because he knows that in a way he's committed himself to do something. So I think they'll drag it out, and when you say we're going to work with the international community, that means you're going to work with a very weak institution. It means you're not really going to do it yourself. It means you're fobbing it off to others. And generally speaking, it means you're going to end up doing nothing. Now, if by some miracle it's discovered and they announce, yes, it was used, I think there is a way out for him. He clearly does not want to get involved. That's fine. I understand that. That's his policy. He thinks it'll be a disaster like Iraq. But at the minimum, they should arm the rebels that we trust. They should have been doing this for months, for a year. I think it's a scandal that we haven't. We're going to have no say when Assad is gone and the new government is formed. So I think that's where it ought to start. But it's clear he doesn't want to do anything.
The international community should be working with the Syrian Opposition Council the day after Assad falls, that we secure the weapons and destroy them forever so they can't be used against us or anyone else. Secondly, contain this fighting so that the King of Jordan does not fall.
Since your last visit to Jordan 5 weeks ago, we've had about 60,000 refugees, up to over 500,000, so we're at 10% of an increase of our population.
5 weeks, 60,000 refugees.
Look, Jordan has always been the one country in the region, after Israel, of course, that has been reliably pro-American. This is for 60, 70 years. The pressure it's under is tremendous. It took in the earlier decades, Palestinian refugees. It had a civil war. It also has pressure from the Islamists inside the country, and yet it hangs in there. To add the Syrian refugees onto that at a time of recession with high unemployment is to risk the regime, which I think makes this a very high strategic priority. At the least, if you're not going to put any troops in Syria, and I'm not sure I would do that, we could put troops in Jordan as a way of saying stay out, the way that we have troops on the DMZ in Korea.
Every week, we ask you to vote in our Friday Lightning Round. This week, we'll cover two topics you voted for. First, the Internet Sales Tax Bill. We are back with the panel. Charles.
Look, the argument of whether it is a tax increase or not is angels on the head of a pin. You could argue it either way. The real issue here is the fairness argument, that if you're an old-fashioned store, you have to have your customers and you pay the sales tax, and online you don't. Which, I mean, you're already at a disadvantage if you're an old-fashioned store. You have to cover rent, you have to cover insurance and all that. So I think you want to have something that will level the playing field. You can do it one of two ways. You abolish all sales taxes for real stores, and that nobody pays, or you get the internet people to pay the sales tax as well. I think the second is the only way to do it, obviously, but I would agree with Steve. There should be a big carve-out for small and startups, small business on the internet and startups. Otherwise, you will never get them. The regulations will crush them.
Next topic is the president speaking to Planned Parenthood today.
After decades of progress, there's still those who want to turn back the clock to policies more suited to the 1950s than the 21st century. And they've been involved in an orchestrated and historic effort to roll back basic rights when it comes to women's health.
Catholic Association issued a statement soon after that saying, quote, "It is outrageous that President Obama addressed the Planned Parenthood gathering this morning at a time when Planned Parenthood has been exposed for having known about the Gosnell horrors, yet took no action to report this abuse of women and babies." Obviously, Gosnell is the abortion doctor in Philadelphia. Charles.
I think it is an outrage. I think it's outrageous how Obama acted years ago when he was in Illinois, and 3 times he voted against a bill that would make infanticide illegal, which you think would be legal in the case of a live birth and an abortion. So this is all consistent. This is all extreme. This is extremism on abortion. This is a country that needs respect for each side and looking for some way to satisfy the 2 arguments which are deeply entrenched. I think there are ways to do it. Obama is doing the exact opposite, and I think it's cynical as a way to win a constituency for himself and for his Democratic successors.
Juan.
Well, I think he has every right to speak to Planned Parenthood. Not only is it, in terms of the law, a right to support abortion rights in this country, I think you're looking at a politician who says these folks, he said it literally in the speech, these folks helped to get past the Affordable Health Care Act. They organize, they mobilize, they're totally in support of it, and the president sees preventative care as an essential element of what Planned Parenthood does. It's not simply about abortion.
Infanticide is not preventative care.
Well, no one's talking about infanticide.
Well,
is that what you're saying that Planned Parenthood does?
That's what the Gosnell trial.
Talking about infanticide.
That's what the Gosnell trial was.
Let's quickly, FAA furloughs and the House voting today to move the money around. It's going to the president's desk. He hasn't signed it yet. Down the road.
Well, the president loses. He wanted the big sequester reversal, and he didn't get it.
Juan.
You know, if you're rich in this country, you can get Congress to change its tune.
It's a correction of an idiocy. It was overdue, and it showed that the president's cynicism in trying to get people to turn against Republicans over this was a failure.
This has been a Sunfish production.